So I'm going to ask everybody if you for now could turn off your cameras. I will mute you just for the sake of this opening session and unmute at some point. And then we'll get fully into the small groups again. Unfortunately, they don't let me carry over the groups from yesterday, so I've been adding you furiously as you all were talking about the alternative ed stuff. So I've got a lot of the groups underway, but I will finish those before you all head off into your small groups in a bit. We are back. This is day 2. Welcome back. Great to hear all the folks talking. It was great to talk about typewriters and vinyl too. I was enjoying that conversation, all the analog materials that a lot of us don't know, our kids have no idea about. Though I gotta say, vinyl is making a comeback. Like my teenagers, you know, in some ways are giving me a hard time about not having a turntable in the house right now. But maybe that'll be their sweet 16 birthday present for my twins. So a couple housekeeping notes as people traipse in. It is day 2 of a 2-day event. Amazing work that everybody engaged in yesterday in your small groups. I took that material, I read it, I thought about it, and I talked to Robin and Jonathan Singer about it, and they also were very impressed and excited with the work that all of you have done. They are hoping to, it's still a little touch and go with what their schedules look like. They're hoping to be back here with us at the end of our day to kind of do some further reflection and some next steps talk as well. All of their material is available in our Google folder right now. I will put the link up there again. I hope by now everybody's gotten that and knows where that is. The goal will be for today a little different, honestly, because we set the stage a lot yesterday and we got to know each other a bit, and clearly your SMHAPP student leaders as their principals of your various schools really stepped into that role, and many of you stepped into what sounds like some pretty good character work. A lot of my experience in college and young adulthood was being involved in improv comedy, and I did some training at the Second City. Those of you in Chicago know what that is. That's the kind of one of the main improv comedy training spaces, and so I did some of that work. I certainly never got to the main stage, or you never would see me on TV or anything. But what I learned from doing that work and being part of it is how important it is to be able to create scenes and be able to get into characters and really honestly just kind of roll with what we know comes at us in schools. I mean, that was beyond that I just enjoyed doing it before I had figured out I want to be a school social worker. This was a big part of, I think once I got into schools and realized how complicated and day-to-day and moment-to-moment they could be, that was a real helpful thing for me. So I'm saying all that because as I show you the agenda again and review kind of what we're gonna do, we're going to not shift too much. I mean, the times are going to stay the same. So nothing's different about that. We will end at 4. We will have a kind of culminating activity where I've invited all of the SMHAPP 3rd cohort graduates to join us. And we're going to do a brief little ceremony for them, and you'll get to celebrate them. And then we will, they can stick around, but we will have a kind of culminating activity ourselves about kind of what we've learned over these 2 days. We will be done by 4. And so the time the time schedules in some ways is not changing, but I do want to note some differences in terms of what we're going to do this morning that I think in some ways will draw on this improv comedy background. I have this this very substantial and really in-depth work that all of you already did, and our goals of getting us today to look at your plans through a lens of anti-racist dismantling of systemic forces, looking at that, honestly looking at a lot of what's in your plans. I think you have a very good start in those things. So I'm excited to hear what you all talk about when I'm done doing my first kind of intro lecture today. And then once you've done that, I'm gonna invite you to, or I'm gonna ask you to invite me into your breakout room, which a lot of you did, mostly around technical things last time, but this time to put yourself into the role of talking to me as though I am And we can decide if I'm the superintendent of your district, we can decide if I'm the state board of ed who, sends out people to review plans, whatever it is. I'm going to ask you to do that. Share with me what you think the strengths of your plan are, any questions or concerns you have about your plan. And then based on the scenarios that I worked out with Robin and Jonathan last night, I'm going to give you additional information. And I went back and forth. I thought, well, I could do it where I just send it to you in written form, but I thought it would be better to actually do it in interacting with you. Also, I think it's really important to for me, not to just be, remotely watching you do remote work. I want to be part of what you're doing today. So this is a chance for me to interact with all of you and give you any feedback. We will then go up to noon. We will break for lunch, and everybody, there's no additional activities today for lunch. So we'll be back at our room in 1:15. So that will be kind of a whole all group gathering. So basically after I do this bit and then I do my kind of intro lecture about anti-racist school mental health practice, we're going to be in our small groups for the rest of the morning. Certainly, we're all adult learners. I trust you guys. Whatever you need to do around breaks, in the agenda it lists break at 10:30. You can break whenever you feel like it. I just ask that you finish at noon to give everybody a chance to eat lunch and then come back at 1:15 ready to go as a large group. We will then get into, after we do a little large group stuff, we will then get into your last small group from about 1:30 to 3, again with a break built in as you need it. Where you're going to certainly take stock of what you've worked on yesterday and today. And you're also going to be able to really, I think, look at your own reality, because I know even as we were waiting to get started, people were talking about the variety of ways that they're seeing their schools make plans, or they're still waiting on plans. It doesn't take much time to go on the internet or watch TV right now to hear amazing and disturbing things. We had the spokesperson for the White House yesterday saying we're not going to rely on the science about whether to reopen. We have, the governor of Georgia is suing the mayor of Atlanta for recommending masks, not even requiring masks. And I saw a fractious parent meeting in Provo, Utah yesterday of parents demanding that their schools open. At the same time, we also have, I think, an increasing and Robin got at this yesterday, and I'm seeing this too, an increasing number of people within organized labor, parent groups, and other feminist organizations, and other just groups related to some of the work that we did with our survey, who I think are very genuinely raising concerns about whether it's safe to reopen for a variety of reasons, and saying that has to be a consideration. So we're in some real kind of ripped from the headlines time, right? And so we want to come back after lunch and kind of do a bit of a recentering of where all of you are. You all are going back into your own environments, your own schools, and whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So I want you to have a chance to process that with your group and support each other. And then because of what I've been looking to do myself, and what a bunch of awesome people, our SMHAPP students and many others have joined us at this point in doing, we have two resources, schoolsocialwork.net, which a lot of you have been to and know about, School Social Work Network, which again, we have 4,600 of us there. So my guess is probably a lot of you have joined that at some point. Those could be places, in addition to if you decide you want to apply to the SMHAPP program for fall, where I want you to really think about what's next. How do I keep this work going? Do I want to have a professional learning community that is hosted from our site, where this group that's meeting now stays together? Do I want to take some of the work you're going to hear about in a minute about being a co-conspirator, an anti-racist school mental health professional? Do I want to take some of that work, do it for a while, and then write about it, write about my experience on the schoolsocialwork.net site? Do I want to be part of a podcast? Our school social worker and friend, Charles Barr, does the Common Ground podcast, and he would be very interested in hosting discussions with any and all of you about your experiences doing this work this last 2 days. And then finally, I am going to be having 2 more, maybe more, based on this pandemic, Facebook Live events for schoolsocialwork.net. Well, you could certainly hop on and be part of that and be a guest host with me. So there's many opportunities once we get into the afternoon to say, okay, how do I take this amazing work that people have done and are doing, and how do I tell people about it? because as much as we need to do our own stuff and as much as we need to pay attention to our own schools and our own families, people are hungry to know what you all are talking about right now. I cannot tell you how excited people are when I've told them about this outline and how people came together and how many of you showed up in a virtual environment. So again, you don't have to do any of that. That's all up to you. But I would really wish, we know that a big part of what Robin talked about yesterday is how school nurses are often not invited into those spaces and to make their voices heard. And she's been able to do that very recently in addition to all the other work she's done. But I would want for any and all of you that want to do that, I would love to help you do some of that. So anyway, more to come on that. Okay, so let's revisit just a bit of what you all talked about. I'm going to pull up my presentation for today and a few other things I want to show you. So the first thing before I go to the presentation itself is just to remind you of a document that we referred to, that several of you actually worked with a bit in your small groups, which is totally fine and great. That's the wrong one. Here we go, that's the right one. So this is the policy brief that my friends at UCLA put together based on our survey project. And again, it's certainly it's out there now. It went out the night before we all got together. The key pieces that I think are in here that could be part of your conversations today and going forward, then will relate very much to what I'm about to get into, is this business about what schools need the greatest supports. So I intentionally gave you schools that are from pretty diverse kind of socioeconomic parts of Illinois in terms of their families' income levels and some issues of racial demographics, et cetera. But what we know is that our communities of color and our lower income communities, including white low income communities, are being hardest hit by this crisis and this disaster that Jonathan talked about. And so what we're calling for is that we do something about these very serious things that are all in this table. All of the things you're looking at here are identified by the sample of school social workers as things that at least half, if not more than half, almost all of their families have unmet needs in. And I know I talked about this yesterday, but I just want to highlight this as we start to talk about anti-racist practice, because all of these have implications for our larger society, but they clearly are disproportionately hitting our Black and brown students and families and communities. And so again, this could be one of those things after today that you say, in addition to taking care of my own school, wherever I am, this is stuff I want to join and be part of. And I want to invite you into that space with us as we push out these findings. You know, again, I don't want to overpromise because I've never done one of these before, but I'm told by my colleagues that they're going to really push to get a congressional briefing with the Congressional Black Caucus and with the Social Work Caucus. They've done it before on school violence stuff, so we'll see if that comes together. But I definitely am going to be trying to get this work out there. So if there's things that really land for you, I also said yesterday, if people have Twitter and use Twitter, if you want to retweet things you're seeing, Steve Whitmore, who I know does a lot of good work on Twitter, was wondering about if there's a hashtag. If people want to come up with a hashtag in the chat, I didn't have any genius one to offer about that, but if someone has one, wants to put it in. If you're not on Twitter yet, I think it's a great way to share information. You can definitely follow us on Twitter at School Social Work. We'd love to have that. Okay. So let's shift gears a bit and let's get to what I'm going to speak to. We'll probably go to about 9:30 with this, and I'm going to, leave time at the end for a few comments, though I really want you all to get into small groups and really interact with each other around it. So I'm not going to close conversation on this, and certainly I will be invited into your groups to talk about this with you as we get into things. But this is, oops, that's a picture you're going to see, but that's the wrong thing. This is a topic that I've been immersed in through a lot of different reasons, through my personal life. My family was very active in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. My parents basically met because they met in Mississippi and Chicago doing work as Dr. King was coming to Chicago. So I've been in and around the idea of racial justice and social inequity and, the idea that we need to tackle these things really from birth. I don't say that to give myself any credit. I don't say that because I'm good at this. I say it because I've been expected to think about it since I was a little boy. And what I'm going to do now is take you into kind of recent thinking that I've had related to a lot of people who are doing scholarly work and activist work and have really taken on, I think, this critical moment we're in, where all the things that are happening in our society need to be looked at through a lens of what are we doing about white supremacy and what are we doing about an anti-racist frame. So I'm going to offer you some ideas. Some of these may be ideas you've already heard about. I'm going to try to be very close to the source material to tell you what others have shared and taught me. This is not necessarily going to sit well with everyone because this may not be where you're at. You know, a lot of what I think we're seeing in particularly white America right now is a willingness to listen and to think about what the particularly young Black people and a lot of LGBT Black people are saying in the streets, trans activists. Like there's a lot of willingness right now of kind of white institutional forces to, you know, make statements about this, to talk critically about their own organizations, and I welcome that. Our school needs to do that. I need to do my own work on that. But I know there's also, you know, a desire sometimes, I think, for us to, as white people, those of us who are on today that are white, to kind of look at this as something that we want to kind of address and then kind of move on. And, you know, that's not an option for people that live this every day. It's also not really an option for us in school mental health. And that's what I'm going to kind of park on today, is that these things have been going on for, you know, 400 years, a lot of us believe, but they've definitely been going on predating the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And we have a responsibility as school mental health practitioners and educators to say, where is our role in becoming an anti-racist school mental health professional? So again, it's fine if all of this lands for you as stuff you've already thought about and thinking about. The equity stuff I read in your plans sounds like a lot of you are doing this work. So a big shout out to everybody doing that. But I also want to ask you to go with me a little bit and be willing to be a little uncomfortable, because I'm going to develop an idea that isn't mine, but that is one that's really resonated with me that I want to propagate further, which is this idea of being a accomplice or co-conspirator versus being an ally as a white person, or really as an educator, because this certainly is an issue for Black and Brown and Asian and Native peoples as well, is how do you support in your own schools, in your own populations, working from an anti-racist framework as well. So, all right, so that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna speak to this for a while. And let's get started. This is all being recorded, by the way. This is all in the anti-racist resources slides. You can go get them and read along with me if you like. Okay, so here we are, and I'm going to define anti-racism and do it from a lens of what we know based on scholarly work, based on historical work. I'm going to offer some ideas about what this could look like for us, because while there's plenty of people talking about this, I would say, in education, and there are definitely people, I think, increasingly in school social work and other places doing workshops on it. We don't have a lot of writing on it just yet. It's coming, but we don't have a lot of that. So I'm going to kind of generalize or build on things that are already out there. I'm going to talk about why it matters. I think we probably are a bit of a group that doesn't need a huge rationale about why the issue matters, but maybe why this particular pathway into thinking about it and the more kind of critical consciousness aspect of it is necessary will be something I'll be interested to hear from you when you get in your small groups, what you think about it. This idea, as I said, about being a co-conspirator versus being an ally. You will bring this in your small group work, in that I will ask you to get in your groups, reflect on what you hear me talk about right now. Again, be able to bring me in, ask questions, push back, all those things. I welcome that. I'm also going to ask you to kind of think about the plan you've already created, and think about, on a scale of 1 to 10, as crude as that is as a measure, how anti-racist is your plan right now? And again, this is not to put people on any kind of scale or put people on the spot or shame them. It's to really just, you know, think about the fact that many of us in education, many of us in social work, many of us in other fields, don't reflexively think of ourselves from this angle. We like to think we do because we're a field that thinks of ourselves as a social justice field. But when you look back at your plan and you hear some of the things I'm going to get into now, how many of these things are there? And, you know, and it's fine if you say, I think our plan is an 8 or a 9, and I think there's lots to do still, but I think we're good. You may also say, you know what, we didn't think about any of that. We thought we did, but we didn't. All right, and then again, I'm gonna have you take some specific questions in your groups that I just went through. All right, this is Bree Newsom. You all maybe remember this story. Maybe you've even seen this picture. It's a pretty famous picture from a Reuters photographer. She is atop the Charleston State Capitol, outside of it, holding the Confederate flag that she went up and got. This is several days after the mass murder in Charleston, where a white guy went and sat, prayed with a bunch of black Bible study folks, and then pulled out a gun and shot them all and killed them. And in keeping with how we do white mass murderers versus black people just trying to walk down the street, he was not only not killed when the cops showed up, but he was actually taken into custody, and the cops even got him Burger King as he was sitting in lockup. That horrified, beyond the murder, the treatment of him, the white supremacist nature of his intentions, horrified a lot of us. President Obama came and spoke at the church where the murder happened. And Bree and her colleagues thought that we needed to do something to really tackle the symbolic nature of what happened in South Carolina. So she climbed this pole, she took it down, lots of consternation about it. However, the governor, Nikki Haley, eventually did take the flag down, and we now know that the flags are coming down around the country in a variety of different ways. So hold this idea of her on that pole, because I'm going to show you a video in a little bit that talks about this distinction between being a co-conspirator or accomplice and being an ally. And so I just want you to have that visual as we go. Another framing kind of a touchstone for me, and a quote, and actually an article, not an article, a text that I've read pretty regularly in my own teaching, and certainly in the last 4 months, has been the letter to the Birmingham jail from Dr. King. If you haven't yet and can, when we're ready to reopen, please get to Birmingham, Alabama, and go to the Civil Rights Museum. It's easily one of the best museums I've ever been to, just as a museum. But what it talks about, how it gets into these issues, is fascinating. They have the actual jail cell door of where he sat and wrote this letter. They have many other things that tell the story of Birmingham and its civil rights battles. So I'm just going to read this quote a little bit, because I think it does frame things for me. It also shows how these issues are not new. It also implicates, I think, a lot of us as white people about how we perceive the movements for justice when they come from, in this case, black communities, but really from other communities of color or other disadvantaged groups. So this is King writing about, I must make 2 honest confessions to you. And he's writing, and some of you probably know this, but just to tell everybody, he's writing to other clergy, people who have essentially told him, slow down, this is not the time, what are you doing? This is not, you're too extreme. You know, these are not the right ways to go about making change. All those things have been visited upon him. So he writes, I must make 2 honest confessions. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block is his stride toward freedom, is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And again, I sit with that because I think the tendency as a white person to gravitate towards a white moderate lens around a lot of issues of social change is very alluring, because it's not always, it usually isn't directly impacting my life the way it would for a black person. It is also complicated, it is messy, it implicates me. Am I part of this? Have I said or done things that implicate my own practice? So it's easier for me to critique. It's the people that sat back as the riots and the uprising was beginning saying, oh, I agree that we shouldn't kill people in the street, but no, you shouldn't loot. Or I agree that we should reform the police, but we shouldn't defund them. And again, you may have positions that say that, and I'm not saying that you're wrong to have them, but I can also say that when we talk about King and we talk about the I Have a Dream and we talk about some of the things that I think we celebrate him for, we often forget how even early in his career, which this is relatively early in his civil rights struggles, he was already staking out a position that was much more emphatic and much more oriented towards a radical agenda. And certainly towards the end of his life, there is no doubt that he had not gone to any kind of conservative end of how he thought social change would happen. So again, King needs to be who he is, and he's a multiple, complicated and interesting, fascinating person in his own right. But this is something that that I wanted to frame for us today. Another framing space that a lot of you, certainly my SMHAPP students, are aware of because we read it and reflected on it, is the 1619 project. I will put in, I didn't get to put it in yet, I will put it in. They've made it freely available. I'll put the whole PDF of all 80 pages into the anti-racist folder. Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's the woman to the upper left in the bigger picture, she won the Pulitzer Prize for organizing this project at this point. She wrote an amazing essay about framing why the 1619 project. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend you read it. I think for those of you who have older kids, this could even be helpful as some ways to get into anti-racist conversations with Black and Brown, White and Asian and Native students you have. It also raises, I think, some profound issues about the current realities pre-COVID, but certainly it's been accelerated through this, of how the reality of how Black Americans came to this country, and they didn't come as Americans, they came as enslaved peoples to start with. The experience in 1619 of the first enslaved peoples landing here in Virginia and what it meant going forward is really what is so powerful about this magazine, in my view, is that it's not just history. It is history. It's often history that's not told, or history that's been kind of scrubbed or underemphasized. But the history is living now. The history is living now with our wealth disparity. It's living with the way we police. It's living with the way that we organize politics. It's definitely living with this very real issue we're all living in right now, all of us, which is we don't really have a social safety net that includes everyone. And Hannah-Jones's thesis, which I co-sign as well, I think it's got a lot to it, is we've never really had a full social welfare state because there's a part of our country that doesn't want to give that to Black people. And we've historically not given it to Black people. We've given Black people policing and incarceration and Jim Crow, but we haven't been willing to give them, say, childcare or healthcare or things after the Civil War, benefits, or coming back from World War I or World War II, the same benefits that the white GIs got. So we've consistently made decisions to not include Black people in the things that we've done around social change. And so that's where we are right now, is are we going to do something different now? And I hope we are, because I think once everyone's helped, including Black people, we're all helped, but that's where we are right now. It's not an accident too, and I promise not to talk about Trump a lot today, but just yesterday in something, I don't even know where it came up, he basically, you may have even seen this, he basically made an argument for redlining again, that, you know, in some White House conversation of saying, you know, the suburbs better not get too fair housing oriented or all the white people's property values will go down. I mean, he basically said a version of that. So this is not history, this is happening right now. But it is history, and I wonder if people know what this kind of historical art project gets at. Does anyone want to say in the chat what they think it is? Yeah, Charlene's got it. Everybody with a red dot owned slaves when they signed the Declaration of Independence. So that's where we are as a country. We've started with this amazing, brilliant, game-changing document about human rights, and the people that signed it were all white men, and many of the white men are guys that did not think that some people were human. And again, this guy that put this together. I want to give him credit, Arlen Parsa. He's actually a Chicago filmmaker. I haven't met him yet, but I hope to someday. Another way to kind of think about where we are, and this again is a document, and I got it sent to me by a medical student, so I don't have the site. I apologize, that's bad professor behavior, but it's certainly not mine, I didn't create it. But what I want you to do, and you can look at this a little bit on your own time in your small groups, is look at how many things are below that big thick line and what's above. And I would submit that those of us who are listening to this who are white, I would say most of us would be horrified and flinch and be able to some extent tut and look down on anybody who does the things above the thick line. Because those are things that we can decide as white people is extreme. That's racism. We deny that. We denounce that, right? What we also know is that a lot of the things underneath this are things that white people and white supremacy have been doing for 400 years. Some of them are things that we do very well in schools, and we do them sometimes unthinkingly. I would invite you, when you look at your own school plan and the things you've done, to look at how many of these are there implicitly. Certainly this white savior complex is something I think all of us in social work and school mental health and education have to work through, that we're not there to take these young people who come from families that don't look like ours or don't have the experiences that we might have had, that we're not there to fix them, that we're there to do something else for them that hopefully is joining these families and these kids and doing something that is, the view I use is culturally humble. I'm not interested in cultural competence, even though our code of ethics calls for it. I think that itself a white supremacist idea that I can go into anywhere else and be competent in somebody else's culture strikes me as offensive in a lot of ways, but it is part of our code of ethics. But look at this list, look at the things that are in here, and think about where maybe you've been part of these things. And again, I want you, the reason I told you about my kind of from birth kind of formation around these issues is I grew up in a house where we talked about religion and politics all the time, and we argued and we got into it. And it took me going to college to realize that wasn't how most people, at least most white people, talked, and that was not considered good social manners to get into conversations like that. And that there was particularly a lot of my white friends and people I knew in my college experience that were terrified of being called racist. And again, I'm not here to tell you that I've tried to be racist or that I spent a lot of time doing things that are on this slide. But I'm also not, as you'll see in a minute, I want to be an accomplice. I want to be somebody who doesn't flinch in my own kind of white fragility, which I know is another hot book right now we're talking about. I don't want to model to the larger world I'm trying to be part of that this is all about me, that this is something that I can't handle if you challenge me or you call me out in some way. So again, this is a way I think you might want to take and look at for yourself and for your team. Another way that could be helpful that really kind of shone a light to me as we were talking about all these young Black people, but particularly recently just Black adults just in their house, Breonna Taylor in her bed getting killed. But a lot of this violence that police have visited on youth, and we'll get into cops in schools in a minute, has been basically because we pathologize and criminalize what young people do. We do it in schools, we do it in the community, we do it through the way we talk about young people, calling them thugs, etc. And this is a comedy writer. I don't know what show she writes for. She's pretty famous in her own world of comedy writing. But she put this up and it went viral. It exploded in mid-June. And she described a lot of really kind of messed up things she'd done, and it happened. She didn't kill anybody, but she had done some pretty messed up things that easily could have gotten her into major jail trouble and or, depending on the right cop, right time, killed or beat up or sexually assaulted or all the other things that we know police have done disproportionately to Black and brown people. And so what she basically said was, think about the crimes you've committed. You don't call them crimes, you and your parents call them mistakes. You were a young person, your parents were able to maybe get you out of it, or they were able to rationalize it, or certainly the boys will be boys is something we see a lot. And what was so interesting was the explosion of this on Twitter was a lot of white people saying, yes, that was me. Yes, I would have not probably made it to 20 if I had done this and I was Black. Many people of color also joined the mentions and said, thank you for raising this. This is why I've been worried about raising my sons in this current context, or this is why I'm very conscious, and I know lots of Black and brown families talk about how they prepare, particularly their male children, about how to interact with police. And this was a very fruitful conversation that just happened on social media. So again, there's lots of spaces to do this, and I invite you to think of your own. So again, this is somebody that I hope by now you're at least heard the name of, Dr. Kendi. I have not had pleasure yet of meeting him or being in a space with him. I hope to someday. He is really kind of, I think, done some really great framing of what I'm going to show you now, which is what it means to be an anti-racist. And I'm going to quote him directly. I'm going to share kind of my understanding. Some of you may have been involved in studying this or looking at this yourself, and certainly feel free to comment on that or bring that into your small groups. And there actually is I think someone's even put it in right now. There's an event, I think, next Monday as this list. So you can go check him out directly. You don't have to take my word for it. So he develops this idea, and I want to say up front, as an academic and as a person who likes to think critically about things, that this is a rhetorical argument, right? It is a framework, but it's an argument, right? There easily will be people, and maybe some of you will look at this and say, well, this can't be so black and white. This can't be so binary. But for now, stay with me and look at it, because I do think it helps frame what is different with thinking of yourself engaging in anti-racist practices versus what I think we sometimes do, which is talk about diversity or talk about equity in ways that are fairly toothless. So a racist isn't just somebody who says the words that were above that thick black line, or does things that clearly are offensive, whether it's wearing blackface or certain other ways to signify racism. It's someone who supports racist policies through their actions, and I would argue through their inactions sometimes. And then this one is an anti-racist is the opposite. Someone who supports this policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. So putting yourself in a space where you say and do things that manifest in a space that challenges kind of the dominant structure you're in. Now, this is where I love Kendi's work, because one of the other things I think we can all easily fall into is looking at these things as very fixed. And I don't want to wade into what I think a lot of people on the right like to get into right now is, whether black and brown people can be racist themselves. Like, I think Kendi has a very nuanced take on that I encourage you to read his take on it. But he says racist and anti-racist are like peelable name tags that are placed and replaced based on what someone is doing or not doing, supporting or expressing in each moment. They are not permanent tattoos. No one becomes an anti-racist or an anti-racist. So even though I titled my talk On Becoming, I didn't know how else to frame it other than I wanted to raise that for you today. What does this mean? Is this something else that requires what he talks about here? We can unknowingly strive to be a racist. We can knowingly strive to be an anti-racist. Like fighting an addiction, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. Now, I would submit that as educators, as people that showed up to do this work today, that you probably do a fair amount of this on a lot of other things you do related to your work. You may even just be someone who does that, just in your own personal life, that you reflect, you try to create a space for self-care where you look at yourself, you look at your environment, you look at what you've done. This is where I think of the virus, so to speak, of racism, and how it presented right at the duality of these brilliant white men creating this amazing document of human rights, being able to hold in their head the idea that even those people that they were celebrating didn't count as more than 3/5 of a person. So the human rights didn't extend to everyone, even in that moment of clarity for the world. So how do we do this? I think the addiction imagery is pretty interesting, and I need to think about it more myself. But anyone who's had an addiction, whether it's to food, to substances, knows that you can't just kick it. You have to do it every day. It's a one day at a time thing, right? So that's essentially what I think Kendi's getting at, is that these things are not fixed. These things are situational, but we can work at it. And I would say, for me, I knowingly strive to be an anti-racist. Whether I succeed and whether that's what happens every day, that's not up to me fully, but I strive to do that. Here's more from Kendi. What is a racist idea? He wants to develop that, and that's part of what I want to invite you to go into your groups in a bit and look at from your own plans. A racist idea is any idea that suggests one racial group is inferior or superior to another racial group in any way. Racist ideas argue that the inferiorities and superiorities of racial groups explain racial inequities in society. So this is very prevalent, and you can find lots of examples on this in our society right now. An anti-racist idea is actually an idea that suggests that racial groups are equals in all their apparent differences, that there is nothing right or wrong with any racial group. Anti-racist ideas argue that racist policies are the cause of racial inequities. So again, there's a lot there to unpack. We could do a whole seminar, we could do a whole semester looking at that. To be fully transparent, there are people who are thinking critically about race who would argue that there are things that are unequal, not because people are racially, biologically different, but because we've structured things so that the differences that manifest in our society are so hardwired into us at this point that we have to do things that are actively anti-racist that target those things. But Kendi really argues that what we really need to do is, do we get to a place where we treat everybody in a way where we don't assume that the racial group they're in explains their differences? And again, this is a complicated idea, and I'm happy to unpack it with you all when you invite me into your groups. But what he's arguing is that racist policies are the cause of racial inequities. That the reason that we have schools that look different is because we've decided as a society that some people get certain things because of their race, and that we have, you know, centuries of examples of that. We're seeing that play out with COVID. Equity is where a lot of this can manifest for us, and this is where we can get very, I think, specific about what education means in our role in this. And this is from Paul Gorski and his colleagues' work. I always like to feature it because I like the work. I also like it because he's a white man himself, and he steps into this space and says, I'm here to strive to be an anti-racist. I don't want any awards for it, but I'm trying to raise these issues, and I'm going to tell tales out of school, so to speak, of what other white educators have said to me over the years. So what he talks about is the direct confrontation principle. There's no path to equity that does not involve a direct confrontation with inequity. So when we use diversity statements, when we talk about representation, those things are not empty, those things are not unimportant, but they don't get at the structural issues that, that might actually reproduce the inequity. Certainly there's things within this that I think are really spicy and interesting, and I think they're worth looking at. Number 5, I want to kind of look at a little bit with you, the redistribution principle. All right, this idea that it is about redistributing resources, and that is something Americans are deeply uncomfortable with in lots of ways. We do it, but we rationalize it in different ways. We get very anxious when we think about redistributing resources, even though we have a lot of history of doing that for specific groups. The idea of fixing injustice, not kids. So one of the things I think as a school mental health professional myself, I could easily fall into is to want to fix a kid when in fact some of what makes the kid be in the situation they are, making the choices they are, is the structures that the schools put in place and maybe the larger society. And so these are just some examples. This is all on the slides. You can look at it and think about. All right, now what is an accomplice? All right, I've been talking about that word a bit, and then I'm going to show you this video that builds on Bree Newsom's scaling the pole to get the flag. So actor, ally, accomplice. An ally is something I think we've seen a lot of. There's certainly a lot of writing about it. I'm not here to tell you it's bad. I'm not putting value judgment in that way on it. I am, though, going to argue that it's not sufficient, right? I think there's something to be said when you look at the accomplice to ask yourself, does that actually move the needle? Does that get us to where we are maybe a more just society as we move forward? So, and again, this comes from a site called whiteaccomplices.org. So you can go look at that and go check them out. So the actions of an accomplice are meant to directly challenge institutionalized racism, colonization, and white supremacy by blocking or impeding racist people's policies and structures. And then this one, realizing our freedoms and liberations are bound together, all right? And you know, as a white middle-aged professor talking about this, it's also really important that we, our actions are not about us ultimately. They're informed and directed and often coordinated with leaders, people doing this work for a long time. And I'm going to show you examples of youth been doing this work a long time that are themselves Black, brown, and indigenous peoples, because those people are closest to the pain. Those people have the most access to what works. And they're going to live with the consequences of whatever you do as a white accomplice. So thinking of yourself in that way is really important. I do also want to say that as I'm talking, I'm directing a lot of this obviously to our majority white population of school mental health professionals, and even on this workshop, we have most of us here, I think, are white. That doesn't mean that there isn't work that all of us can do in this, and it also means, though, I think as accomplices, we have to look around and find the people of color who are doing this work and empower them, and to say to them, what do you need? And this gets to actively listening with respect, understanding that oppressed people are not monolithic. There's a lot of discussions and debates in communities of color right now about how to respond to this Black Lives Matter moment and this opportunity. listen to those things, ask them, ask your youth. This one I think is really important, particularly those of us who work close to trauma, work close to really intense situations, and are ourselves going to be in positions where we see lots of this happening. Accomplices aren't motivated by personal guilt or shame. They are not emotionally fragile. So while I think the D'Angelo's work on white fragility is a really important starting point for some of us, I think it needs to very much be something we move past quickly. That yes, we need to understand what the fragility is, maybe in us and the people around us, but how do we get to a place where that is not driving what we do? That we are really able to stand with people who are being oppressed and people that are living this and do things for them. And again, it's all about building it through consent and being accountable. So it's not just me pontificating on a computer today, it's me doing the work to partner, to connect, and to reach out. So speaking of, these are the amazing young people from Chicago and a group called Good Kids Mad City. Some of you may have seen some of their amazing work on social media as well as their work in the neighborhoods. They've been at it for many years now in really post Ferguson in 2014 and the murder of Mike Brown. But they've been sounding the alarm for a long time now about how important youth voice is and how important it is to put youth voice in front and center. One of my favorite moments was in the midst of the initial kind of unrest and street protest. Kanye West, who's now, I guess, going to run for president or whatever he's saying today, showed up at a Black Lives Matter protest that was organized by Good Kids Mad City. And, you know, there was predictably when a celebrity shows up, a lot of kind of buzz. And I don't think it's either of these black women in red right here, but one of the black women that, young women that ran the protest, took the mic and said, "Welcome, Kanye, but this is not a protest for celebrity welcome. You're welcome to join us, but this is a protest we organized and we're going to keep moving." And I love these guys before that, but that really said a lot to me, that we are talking about a mass movement right now that's coming from black and brown youth, a lot of them additionally LGBTQ youth, who are asking the question, where are we in this struggle, and how do we join each together, and how do we get help from white accomplices and others, other adults to do the work? So this is some more of their work. This is other groups too. Voice is a group that you all that were with us yet last year met them and their work. They're another youth activist group in Chicago. This was a die-in outside the Thompson Center downtown Chicago around police-free schools, which again is a movement that has so far had some ups and downs in Chicago because our current context is still very pro-police and pro cops in schools. And so the 4-3 vote from the school board to keep the contract was really the biggest district that didn't take action. Many other big districts and small districts, including my own in Oak Park, took action to remove police from their schools. But Chicago youth are not being deterred. They're going to keep at it. So they're not just keeping at it by visual protests. They're actually putting data together. So again, this makes the researcher and me just super excited and proud, and I've published this with their permission. This is a group called Students Strike Back, so it's a different group. This is on schoolsocialwork.net right now. That, you know, one of the reasons the police in schools is such a hot button issue in a Black Lives Matter context, in an anti-racist context, and in a white accomplice context is data like this, that 95% of police incidents in CPS involve students of color. Black students are subjected to police notifications at 4 times the rate of white students in Chicago. And Black students currently make up 36% of all CPS students, but 66% were the subject of police notifications. And again, this is publicly available data the kids went and got and they did stuff with. They did further. Think of all those of you in elementary school. 316 kids were arrested or put in some sort of police action in CPS schools. And think of somebody that age and what it had to take to get a police officer involved, and how the adults in the building decided they couldn't handle that young person enough that a police officer needed to get involved. This comes from an activist who I think really said it well, that a lot of us, and maybe some of us sitting here today, say, well, if there's no police, how do I protect my students from others of my students? And this person says they're making a persuasive point, but it's the opposite of the point they're trying to make. And I'll ask you to kind of sit with what you think that means. But I mean, this is this is, again, I think where things have come to in this crucial moment is, police in schools in a lot of ways has a lot of implications for trauma for students. It's often been identified with security and safety. I think we're seeing lots of people, the voice group I showed you earlier, is challenging us to rethink safety and to think about whether that is actually making our youth feel safe. We have lots of research at this point, and certainly what's happening on the ground with young people of color is they're saying that doesn't make us feel safe. It makes us feel unsafe or worried. There's also some compelling evidence from some of my colleagues that study school violence that a police officer on site is not going to make kids more likely to disclose some of the hot button issues that I think got cops in schools to begin with, like school shootings or big fights, because they don't want to snitch, or they don't want to be involved in getting someone else in their school community to be possibly arrested or brutalized by a cop. So again, these are issues that are happening right now and are happening all over the country. It also gets down to us. It gets personal. This is data from the Chicago Public Schools. Some of you in CPS know this data pretty well. We are very interested in funding school resource officers much more at a higher clip than the school counseling and other related services. A lot of the Chicago Teachers Union strike the fall was centered around getting us to where we talked about the need for a school social worker, a school nurse, and a school librarian in every building. Boy, does that seem important now, given what we're seeing with this pandemic and the reopening discussion. But this is also a set of choices. We've decided that safety means cops, doesn't mean restorative practices, having police be in a secondary role outside the buildings, called in only at last ditch efforts, and that otherwise it's on the adults to do things at a three-tier way to make kids safe and to ensure that the school functions well. It's also about, this is a really great example of being an accomplice and a support. This comes from a community organization of adults, Chicago Teachers Union and Brighton Park Council group, who joined with youth to demand these things. And I went to this protest myself and wrote about it for schoolsocialwork.net. And these are the things they're looking for. And again, these are structural things. These are anti-racist, arguably anti-racist things. These aren't just writing a statement saying we support all Black lives. This is saying these are things that could actually really change the game, at least in the view of the people that made these demands. And again, these things are having ripple effects. You're looking at the superintendent of my twin boys' high school in Oak Park, who introduced a resolution or a proposal at the meeting last week to talk about putting a moratorium on having the school resource officer on contract in the school. And then what then ensued, and was fascinating, because again, I think the youth had a lot to do with this, the board members asked questions that basically said, what do we know about what the police officers have done? And what was so interesting was that they didn't know much. They didn't collect much data on it. And the police department was not very forthcoming with the data. They've had a cop and a police officer in schools in Oak Park since the Columbine massacre in the late 90s. They didn't have a lot of information about what that police officer did. And so what then happened was the school board members themselves introduced a resolution saying, we want to resolve that we just actually cancel this contract. And in real time, as I'm sitting there watching this board meeting, that happened on Zoom, that they canceled the contract. So dismantling and looking at things from this lens is possible. It also needs to be done with careful consideration as well. This is Richmond, Virginia. That's the statue of Robert E. Lee. Was turned into a massive public art protest project. I believe it's been shut down in terms of people being able to walk around it now, for now. But it was amazing to look at this and this is a drone view of all the colors, and this is Pride, the Stonewall riot anniversary. So I'm going to go through this quickly because I wanted us to get to some comments and then to why I want to watch this short video. The trauma lens is essential for all the stuff we're talking about these 2 days. This is from SAMHSA's guidance about principles and key elements of trauma-informed care. You can go look at those. You can look at what you've done already and see how well it matches up. This is a systematic review that some of you know about, that I've talked about. I teach in our SMHAPP program about how little we actually know about trauma-informed care in schools, that we have some really great things at Tier 3 and Tier 2 to do. But when we say we're a trauma-informed school, there's a lot we just don't know. And so that's an important thing for us to consider as we make our plans in this small group exercise. This is just more about the study I'll move out of right now. All right. One of the questions, though, that I do want you to sit with as you relook at your plans is, can a school district really claim to be trauma-informed if they employ police? And again, we had some really rich conversations on the network about this. I really struggle with how that can be possible. I know that there is, just like in everything, people say not all cops, my police officer is great. How does that balance with the very real lived reality that, particularly if you're in a community where the majority of students are students of color, there's a lot of evidence that shows that having that police car out front, as they said at my school's board meeting, or having the police officer walking around armed through the hallways, has a negative impact on that student's feeling of safety. So again, these are complicated issues, but I wanted to raise them. We also have wonderful, and you can see some of the folks that are with us today, actually all of those people you can see, they're with us today. We have had conversations in our SMHAPP courses around these issues, and we also look at the issue of restorative justice, and all of the current cohort students wrote research briefs about what the evidence is for restorative justice in schools. And it's better than the evidence for trauma-informed care. There's still a lot to do. We don't know as much as we need to know. And if anything, I hope that what comes out of this current era we're in is that people really start to move and tackle these issues more fully. All right, so we're back to Bree Newsome. So I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Bettina Love, and I'm going to go out of this and go get her clip from C-SPAN 2. She is a professor, I believe she's an education professor. She may have multiple appointments at University of Georgia. She wrote a really powerful book that I would recommend you all check out about abolitionist teaching called We Want to Do More Than Survive. She herself, I guess, though she teaches in Georgia now, she grew up in upstate New York. She'll talk about that in this little clip and be pretty funny about it and compare it to New York City. And she, if you know much about that part of America, that is one of the real focal points of the Underground Railroad and the abolitionist movement. And Harriet Tubman eventually went to stay there and had her home there and died there, actually. So she lived there a long time. So all of that forms a bit of what she talks about. But mostly what she talks about is that example of Bree Newsome and a white man, and I think his first name is James. His second name is escaping me right now. And he stood at the base. First of all, he had a farm where they had poles for, I don't know, for what, for tents or something. Anyway, they had poles on his farm in North Carolina, and she practiced climbing up the pole. He gave her access to that, and they practiced it. And he helped teach her how to climb up a pole safely. And they decided that she would be the one to do it, even though others could do it as well. As a Black woman, she wanted to be the person to do it. And then he did some things you'll hear about from Dr. Love that I think really speak to being a co-conspirator versus being an ally. All right, so it's about a 6-minute clip, and we'll watch that, and then we'll do a little bit more, and then we'll get into groups.
With Black women. Yes, yes. Where do we start? Start with Black women. Yes, yes. That's where you start.
And as we start with Black women, we know that no movement is done alone. And so again, thank you for giving us language. The next question is for both of you. You make the move from allyship to co-conspiratorship. So the question I want you to sit with is, can you identify, once Dr. Love gives us a definition, can you identify a co-conspirator that you've had in your work? And can you break down for us this difference between an ally and a co-conspirator?
Yeah, so
I bet you can.
So, the book is about this idea of abolitionist teaching, right? And so, shout out to upstate New York. I'm from upstate New York. We don't like New Yorkers, but that's okay. Because when you're from upstate New York, like, where you from? I'm from upstate. Queens? No. Brooklyn? No. Albany? No. I'm from upstate New York. Rochester, New York. 90 miles from Canada, right? And so, so we had abolitionists in upstate New York. that's where I grew up. And the one thing about an abolitionist had to be a co-conspirator. I mean, I want y'all for a second to just think about the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad freed over 100,000 enslaved Africans and Black folks. Right? Think about this. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. This was all off trust and love of each other. And to say that this system of racism and bondage, no more. Yeah. We did that. It was everyday people. Farmers, bankers, doctors, teachers, nurses, all ethnicities. We did that as a country. Someone came to your door and gave you a code, you just had to trust them. And so I wanted to bring that back. What would it mean for us in 2019 to think about what it would mean to be an abolitionist and to be a co-conspirator? And in the book, I use James Tyson. Now, many people are not familiar with who James Tyson is. You know Bree Newsom. Bree Newsom was the young Black woman who took that Confederate flag down in South Carolina 8 days after Dylann Roof went into the AME church. And I tell the story in the book because I think it's an important story because Bree Newsom and James Tyson did not know each other. There were some folks who got together and said that flag is coming down. They said, and a Black woman's gonna take it down. They taught Bree how to climb. They had Bree's bail money ready. And that morning, Bree Newsom and James Tyson were at an IHOP. They got the word, come take the flag down. Bree Newsom climbs up on the pole to take the flag down. Now, this is where the difference between an ally and a co-conspirator is. James Tyson, now there's a gate for the flagpole. James Tyson isn't standing like outside the gate. Okay, like Bree, they coming, Bree. Hey, Bree. No, James Tyson, he is inside. And then the police say, you know what? We can get her down. Tase the pole. James Tyson, because he wasn't here, he was here, said, okay. He put his hand on the pole. That white man at that moment understood why he was there. He put his hand on the pole, and he knew that the police would not tase that pole with a white man, healthy white man, right there. He saved her life. That's what it means to be an ally. You can stand out there, and allies know all the language. They read all the books. They come to the meeting with all the terms. Right? They read the report before you read the report. Right? I always say allies make Black folks feel bad. Like, did you read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates book? I didn't read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates book. Like, you know, I've been busy being Black. Right? I didn't read the new Ta-Nehisi Coates book, but I know it's fire. Right? So they come and they know everything and they good. And then after the meeting, you like, well, what we gonna do? They go, you like, how they left already? Where they go? I'm gonna call it. Right? So that's the difference between being an ally and a co-conspirator. You know, and this is that back to that abolitionist. It's to put something on the line for somebody. Yeah. Take a risk to see how to use your whiteness. And I tell folks all the time, whiteness is like a bank. And it just, your ATM card just replenishes itself. So spend it. As the kids say, cash out. Right? Cash out. It's gonna come right back. And so to be a co-conspirator, I try to write in the book, is to take risks for somebody. To put something on the line, but to use it in a way in which you're using your privilege. Yes. Use it. And I'm not just talking about white folks, I'm talking about cisgender folks. Use it for trans folks, like use it for queer folks. Put something on the line. Take a risk. It doesn't have to be a small risk, big risk. James Tyson simply said here, put his hand on the pole. And that's what we are talking about with co-conspirators. Allies, they know everything. They can say, they can talk it. But when it's time, they're not there. And if they're there, they're looking at you like, You going? Oh, you go. You go on the front lines, right? Black folks and brown folks, we don't want to fight racism. The Creator did not put me here to fight racism.
Yeah.
If you believe that, that's racist. Full life and be my full self and my full human.
Yes.
But I gotta fight what y'all created. So they gotta come to the table with something more than just I read the new book. Right. Take a risk.
Okay. So there's a lot in there, a lot that I want you all to kind of sit with and think about, and we can do a little bit of interaction. I know I've gone a little over. We will make time for you to get in your small groups and do breaks and all that. But I want to say a few more things on slides, and then we will shift into groups again. So a lot that I think Dr. Love talks about, I think really critically, is this idea of what it means for us in schools as educators, particularly as white educators, to put things on the line. And I think that can feel very risky. I think it can also feel kind of confusing. It can also feel like at this moment, with everything else that's flooding into us and our own worries and our own experience of the pandemic, it could feel challenging. But I think what I want to offer you is some considerations, is what I intend to do, and what I would encourage all of you to think about ways you can do. How to become a co-conspirator in your school and community, and show that you're in it for the long haul. One of the things I'm hearing again and again from people I'm partnering with and talking to in Black youth activist circles and in other spaces in my own school, university, is the very, I think, legitimate wariness that a lot of Black and brown people are having right now about, okay, what's this going to be like in 6 months, right? Where are people going to be? I mean, Dr. Love just talks about literally like after the meeting, people are gone. But even people that are saying, okay, yeah, it's really good that we're making these moves and we're making these commitments, but where's it going to be in 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, a year? So what does that mean for you to be in the long haul of this? The thing I think that she talks about that I think is really powerful is this idea that some of our white privilege, those of us who are white on this call today, is this renewable resource. And so how do we build awareness where we are and do our own work? I also think, she doesn't talk about it, but a couple other articles that are in that folder written by a Black public health author is one of them, is that there's also internalized racism that people of color have carried with them into their own work, into their own experiences. That is another way to think about, what she said, Dr. Love said a minute ago about, I wasn't put on this earth to fight racism. I was put on this earth to live my life, but I have to because that's where we are. So what does that mean for people of color listening to me right now? It's like, what internalized racism have you absorbed that is impacting your ability to be effective and a co-conspirator? It's essential, I think, and the phrase that the young people have taught me is pass the mic. This is largely about young Black and brown people right now, and I want to center them. I want to give them voice, and I do that as much as I can with what I'm doing on social media, and I intend to keep doing that. But ultimately, I think what's also really important is that we not just make this about 400 years of oppression and the very real threats to Black lives that are happening right now, but there's an enormous amount of joy and power in this struggle. Again, that was baked into me kind of with my civil rights kind of formation as a child, because I got to be around and witness and hear stories of how even in the midst of very, very serious times, there was joy and there was hope. My favorite example of the Cops Out of School protest that the Good Kids Mad City and Voice Kids did is they went outside the board president, Miguel Devalle, I believe is his name. And they were strong. They called him out. They asked him to come out and meet them. He refused. But then they also did some line dancing. They did some really joyous expression of protest where they were enjoying themselves too. And so I take breath from that. I look at that and I say, well, if that's how the young people that are putting their bodies on the line can interact and do this, I need to listen to that. Another example that was very powerful is a group of protesters went to Mayor Lightfoot's house right before the vote and demanded that she support it, which she doesn't. She doesn't support having cops out of schools. She kicks it to local schools, councils, but she doesn't really support it. And sure enough, a ton of police showed up outside her house. It was basically like a barricaded environment. And again, because the kids are going to win and kids know what they're doing, the kids have gone into the police database and basically standing there, a young black woman read out loud all the use of force complaints against the police officers that were there on their badge numbers. It's one of the most amazing, just vivid examples of protest. And, you know, I wouldn't call that even joy. I would call that ferocity, but there's a dynamism and a creativity. And your young people, even if they don't take any direct action around Black Lives Matter and get in the street, they have joy. They have ways that they are expressing themselves and that they're loving life. And you know, we need to know about that. We need to celebrate that. And then I don't want to put too much pressure on anybody, and I also want to acknowledge this work is hard and complicated. But I would love someday to have any or all of you submit something to our schoolsocialwork.net site about what you've heard today and some of the things you've done since, and what that means to you to be a co-conspirator. What's your version of putting your hand on the pole like that white man did for Bree Newsome? You know, what will that look like? I don't know. I mean, I intend to keep writing and thinking about it and doing my own work and keeping myself accountable with it. But you all have ways to do that too. All right. Here's that equity literacy thing again. This is a slide I've used before. You can look at that as you get into the October responses I'll be giving you later this morning. You know, complex change, which is what we're all trying to do and making plans to go into fall, is going to require you to have a lot of things in place. When we don't have vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan, we have something else. We often have these other things that ensue. So you can look at those things and think about complex change, which obviously we're all in the midst of right now in this kind of disaster situation. All right, so this is your takeaways, and I am gonna to make space if people want to put in the chat box any comments or questions they have for me right now, please do. And I can speak to them now. I can also speak to them more in the small groups. I will also be looking to get you in your breakout rooms in a bit. So the first is, you know, you've heard me talk for the last hour or so about being an anti-racist school mental health practitioner. What was new about this? Get into your small groups, talk about what was new. And maybe some of you, none of this was new. Some of this was, you know, I've heard all this before, or, you know, this is what I think, you know, he could have said additionally. All those things are fair. But I also am really interested to know, like, what are you going to maybe apply back to your school context, not just this role play simulation we're doing, but to your own school context. Where does this land for you? What are you going to do with it? Now then, I want you to go to your reopening plan, which, by the way, I meant to say, I left this out when I was getting ready and excited to talk about all this. Of the groups, looking at the groups, we have 4 elementary groups, 2 middle, 2 high school, 3 high school, I should say. We have hybrid plans for 2 elementary, both middle, and 2 high school. We have fully online for 2 elementary and 1 high school. And those fully online have an idea of phasing in reopening in person in some form. So as we got into the work yesterday, and as I read it more overnight, you know, you did a lot of careful consideration about that. So I invite you to now look at these ideas that I've developed today and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how anti-racist do you think your plan is? And kind of discuss your rating and why. And again, it's fair, it's completely fine for these ratings to be all over the place, because that was not what I charged you with doing. I did ask you to think about equity work, which I think obviously relates to this, but I didn't frame things directly this way that I'm doing today. So have that conversation for a while. And then eventually you will want a break. Maybe you'll want to take a break even before we even get started. But I do then want you to invite me into your group to tell me if there's anything about your plan you've changed. And also then I'll ask you some other questions that I have prepared for everybody about your plans. And then I will give you kind of the next step in the choose your own adventure. I'll tell you where we're going and what happened to your school and all that. And I'll play the role of the superintendent or the state board of ed guy. All right. Okay. Pat is asking how do we invite into the group. I believe you should have a button, Pat, that's in there. It should be easy to do. If you're not able to, yeah, it says ask for help. Shannon's helping us as she says that. The Google file, again, someone have that handy. I'll pull it up as we go here, but oops. here. I'm just bouncing around a little bit. Sorry, guys. So while I'm doing that, comments, questions, lots to sit with, lots to think about. Thank you, Lisa. All right. So again, let's go to your groups. When I hit the button, a lot of you won't be there yet because you came in as I was trying to add people. So I will do that. I have the right list for everybody. Michelle's telling people she'll be a little late to group 9. So it is 9:48. We will break for lunch at noon, but basically now it is your group time to work. So I would say probably the stuff I've just given you, I would expect at least 30, 45 minutes of you doing that work and then calling me in, and then we will do the next phase before we get you to lunch. Okay? All right. Enjoy your small groups, and we will talk. And again, anybody that hasn't been invited, I'm in the process of inviting you now, so do not worry. Just going to kind of go in order of the groups, so it may take a little while for me to get down to the lower groups. I'll start with the group leaders, though, to make sure they're there for you. It looks like I've got all of the group leaders, I believe. All right, so I'm just going to start working through. Apologies for the time on this, guys. We'll get it done. Sorry, guys, taking a little while. Let's see. If it would help me, if you guys could put the number of your group in, just that would help me kind of click. I'm looking through my list. If you guys put that in, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Almost there, guys. Okay, I see almost everybody's in. Mary Condon, where were you? You're in group 5.
Group 5.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, the Zoom is not cooperating with me today.
Oh no, I see it now. I see
Okay.
it. Thank you. Got it.
Okay, and Lori. Oops. And then Lisa Schwab, I believe that's you. You're in 6 as well. Okay. I think I did it. People are starting to make their way in. Welcome back. We'll give people a minute or so to get in. While we're waiting before I get started with everything else, just a few notes on some things that are in the chat now. I posted a link to a way for you to kind of sign in to get more information about the certificate program that we have at Loyola that is has lots of people that are leading these groups right now that you can talk to directly and ask what they think about it and get their take on it. But that link is right up there. Her name is Olivia Gazzardo. She's fantastic, and she'll help you figure out any details that you might have, questions you might have about that. The program itself, we have, with all of the ways that our buildings are shut down and all the rest of our lives being kind of up for grabs, they've waived the letters of rec. So I would still love to have letters of rec if you do apply, just so that people get to write about the great work you do and why they think you'd be a good fit for the program. But you don't have to have them to submit your application. Application's free, and everything's due August 1st. So basically, you need to write a statement of why you want to be in it, and you need to get at least unofficial transcripts so you can be part of the mix and do that. So I'll say a little bit more about that later. We're going to have the SMHAPP students are going to have their graduation, and then we're going to kind of wind up with our own kind of debrief and saying goodbye to each other. The other item that's in the live chat that I want everybody to be aware of is we did have 2 focus groups yesterday. And 13 of you were part of that, and thank you for that. Dr. Filippo and Dr. Shaman, thank you very much for being part of the mix on that. They got great information out of their time with you. I hope that was useful. Thank you, Amy, for saying that link doesn't work. I'm going to check the link as we're talking right now and fix it. Thank you for testing it, though. We are very interested in continuing to learn from all of you about what are the things that happened during the pandemic first phase when we were on lockdown the first time, and then as we see things move very quickly into a variety of other ways that we're all thinking about this. And I apologize, Amy, that link is not working. So I'm going to send you a link in the chat for everybody to the main Loyola School of Social Work site where you can go in there and there's an apply thing if you want to do that. And I'll say more about that too as I'm going. So the focus groups are designed for us to learn more about, from all of you, about what you're taking with you into this new school year, what you've learned, what are things that you need. Obviously, we want to be at Loyola offering support and help, and also through the schoolsocialwork.net and the School Social Work Network, we want to offer things there. So those are all parts of what I'm going to ask you to kind of reflect on in the next couple hours as you get in your small groups again, is kind of where do you want to go next? I hope you know by now this is not a 2-day infomercial for the SMHAPP program. We love to give CEUs. I'm very interested where possible to give away as much of the great stuff that my colleagues and I have been able to do as researchers. So you will always have free access to the network. You'll always have free access to the .net. But some people, and you have a number of them here today that are fantastic group leaders, some of you may want to go deeper. Some of you may want to get 15 credits towards a salary lane advancement. Our school and our dean, who you'll get to see later today, hopefully, has really been a visionary in terms of seeing the value of this program and how much of what we don't have in school mental health is ongoing professional development, that we're often just kind of out there. And so this program was designed to meet some of those needs, and he really fought hard to get a tuition discount. So it's certainly still an expense. It's $10,000 for 2 years for 15 credits, all books, everything else included. There is financial aid available in form of loans, but that, again, with everything else going on, I totally understand if that's not where people are at this year, but I do want it on your minds and want you thinking about it. We do have about half our cohort for our 5th cohort already in place. And I would love to have another cohort. We're about to graduate our 3rd. We have our 4th rolling right now. I would love nothing more than to have you consider being part of the 5th one. So, all right. The other thing I want to just kind of remind you is of the schedule and kind of what we're going to do. And then I want to say a little bit of setting the stage of getting you back into your small groups. So the schedule is, I'm going to talk for a bit about some thoughts about next steps that aren't just about the certificate and focus groups, but other next steps that you all can consider as you get into your small groups. I'm going to task you with kind of 3 things that I want you to do in your groups. Actually, yeah, it's 4 things when I think about it. So the first one is, I'm just going to type them as I talk, is finish the scenario work that you started that you may not have gotten fully done before lunch. So the things that I gave you as kind of part 2s, finish that up. The second thing I want you to do is to write a group paragraph that can be totally attached to the plan itself. And this can be written by your group leader. It could be written by one of you. Write a group paragraph reflecting on the experience of doing this simulation. And I would love everybody to do that collectively. Certainly, I don't want it to be too time consuming in your time together, but I'd like you to write something because I'd love to have that feedback. Clearly, what we're hearing from all of you anecdotally and what I'm seeing in the stuff that was written up last night is a lot of you are really putting a lot into this and getting a lot out of it. And I plan to try to find a way to continue doing versions of this in coming years. And so I'd love to learn about what landed for you, what was helpful. And then secondly, because I am interested in this as well, how do we make it better? So what didn't work? How do we make it better? And that could be, that doesn't have to be a paragraph, but that could be whatever you want to write about that. Also put it on that document so that I just have that when you guys are done today. And then the last thing, and this is what I do want to talk about for a few minutes and do a share screen in a minute, is where to next? What do you want to do next? What do you want to do with this? And I think we've never had a time, I always ask these questions at the end if you've been coming for a while, but I don't think we've ever had a time where this is more of a pressing and urgent question for us to answer, right? I mean, I hope and I pray that all of you get some time this summer that feels like relaxation and vacation and recharging. I know that at this point, CPS just came out with their plan today. They're going to do some version of a hybrid model. It looks like they're proposing. Many of us are going to have trouble relaxing because we're thinking about starting the year. We're thinking about all the other things that are happening in our world right now. But what I also want you to do is think about the fact that for the last 2 days, almost 70 of us have spent this time together where we've essentially tried to figure out some really crucial issues about how to reopen, how to look at these things at a 3-tier level around SEL, race and equity, and trauma. And you've all gotten to meet each other and you've all gotten to learn from each other a bit. So what I would wish for you is as you meet in your small groups is you consider at least some of these as potential options. And these are options, nothing, this is not, I am a professor, but this is not homework. But I also want to tell you that this group already, I know you feel like you're just kind of sitting in your computer today, but this group already is getting the attention of people around the country because they're really interested to know what are practitioners thinking and doing and how are they going to get ready for this. So if that interests you and you want to do some things about it, here's some options you have. Option number 1, and I'm always a big fan of this, is you can write. I love to write myself. You are completely ready to write, even if you think you're not, because you are living an experience right now as a practitioner that is rich and is complicated and is full of things that people want to know about. And so one of my colleagues, Sean Delaney, managing editor of our site, and she and I and our co-editor, Scott Carchady, would love nothing more than to help you put together an article about your experiences right now or other things that maybe are in that intervention potluck that I want you to think about, like things you really like to do or things you've learned. If you've been to this site at all, you can tell we have a lot of ways to get involved. We have things that we call intervention section, where you actually write about an intervention you've done. We have 2 new ones. There was a wonderful collaboration from Virginia of a school psych and a school social worker who wrote about creating a Google Classroom to do SEL for their kids. And you can read about that. You could team up and do that with someone in your small group. We also are very interested in getting into tools for practice. So things that people are using that are specific things that they've used, progress monitoring tools, standardized measures, things like that. And then we're also all about research. We're all about looking at what we know, what's evidence-based, what does evidence-based mean in these cases. Some of this is research I've been involved in. Some of it, like this one about cops out of schools, was done by youth themselves. This is all stuff that you could do as well. Finally, we do have a podcast option. My friend Charles Barr, some of you may know Charles from Illinois, he does the Common Ground podcast, and we're partnered with him to post things jointly. So you can see we've got people, Jim Raines, we have a functional behavioral assessment one, we have violence prevention. You could come up with an idea maybe from your small group of wanting to do a podcast, and we can make that happen. All right. Within all these things are also other ways to do the creative sharing that I think we're all going to need to do in this coming year. We are interested in publishing infographics. We're interested in publishing videos. We haven't really done videos. I've done some ads for our SMHAPP program, but we really haven't done videos beyond that. But I would be interested in any of those things. So that's the first kind of big option. Have you ever wanted to do this? Have you ever wanted to have your voice heard that way? And we're ready to help you do that. Most of the people on this site are practitioners. This is not a researcher-driven or professional writer site. We welcome those people, but that's not the priority. The priority is people like yourself that are in the field doing the work. Okay. The second option is going to sound even more intimidating, maybe, if you're already thinking, wow, writing is really something I don't do a lot of. I would love nothing more than some of you out of this workshop experience today to think about writing an actual article that is a scholarly article that we could submit to and would be peer reviewed for our International Journal of School Social Work. This journal is in its 5th volume. You're about to see, as we talk here, the animation of where people around the world are downloading this every day. We have, past week I should say, is the actual visual. We have about 20 downloads a day on average from all over the world, and really all over the world. It's really heartening and gratifying. And the reason it's all over the world is that we've decided to be what we call open access, and we've made open access the idea because we want everybody, yourselves included, to be able to go get an article and read it and not have to pay for it or not have to worry about it's behind a paywall or all the really stupid ways that we make it hard for people to find research. So if that interests you, again, I'm the editor-in-chief of this journal. We would be able to help you put together some ideas for that. It is a peer-reviewed space, so it's a different kind of dynamic where I can't promise anything gets published here. It has to be reviewed by people that aren't me, that wouldn't know your name and you wouldn't know their name. It's called the blind peer review process. But I would love nothing more than some of you who are going to tackle all these issues this year, particularly this idea of being a co-conspirator, or some of the ways you're going to tackle the really difficult issues of trauma and SEL. If you wanted to write about that in a way that was a scholarly article, I'd love to help you do that. All right. And finally, this one I hope everybody is up for doing. I've renamed a group on our School Social Work Network. I'm hoping everybody's on that by now. If not, you can reach out to me in the chat and I can make sure you get a link to be invited. But this is actually, I'll just go out to the front so people can see where I'm going. This is the main page for our network. There's almost 4,700 people who have joined this site. We have under it something called groups. And these groups are where I would like to encourage everybody to post at least something about your experience in this over the next couple weeks. And I've renamed it the FSPP SMHAPP Summer Institute group. And this could be where you come, put things on there, ask questions, come together. It's free to join the network. It's certainly free to join this group. One of the things I think our network needs is people going to it more regularly. I mean, people do go to it and people get things from it, but I would love it to be more of a living, ongoing space, especially as a lot of us will be working remotely. All right. So those are just some thoughts and options if you get in your small groups and you get fired up and excited. You know, let me know what you're thinking about all those things. All right, okay. So I made it to 1:30 and I'm going to go up to breakouts now. Look at where the breakouts are. As predicted, a lot of you are out of your rooms. So if you wouldn't mind to expedite things, I have at this point a pretty good idea where everybody goes. But if you would just put your name and your number of your group, I'll just hit the button and get it going. All right, so I'm creating the rooms right now for those of you who are in them. Go to them, and then otherwise I'm gonna put everybody else in them. I'm just gonna kind of go in order, guys. Sorry about this, just to make sure I got everybody. Just gonna get the leaders first, and let's keep rolling. Some of you guys were already in, that's why it's taking me a little longer. I'm having to confirm people. And everybody be ready to be back here by 3 o'clock. So take breaks and just be ready to be here by 3. Somebody's listed as staff. If you know who you are on that, let me know. Okay, almost there, guys. Okay, almost there. Charlene, where are you?
Group 9, please.
9. Okay. Let's see. We got just a few more. Emily is 1. Nancy's group. Lori Short, where are you again, Lori? 6, right? Kimberly. Where'd you go, Kimberly? You're in which one again?
I'm in Nancy, 4, I think.
4, okay. And then Mary Condon, you're at high school, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm in 5.
Oh, you're in middle school, sorry. All right, I think I've done it. Okay, everybody should be in a room. Look, Rich is showing up, he's not.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I'm not either.
Okay, all right, so what's happened is you guys joined and then they're showing you're not in, so hold on.
I'm not popped over either.
Was that Lisa?
Yeah,
All right, yeah, nothing personal, Lisa.
I know.
I'm
okay.
supposed to be in group 9.
Yeah, the Zoom gods acted funny. They acted like you guys were all in and now they're not, so hold on, let me.
I just thought I was waiting for you to push the button.
Yeah, I thought I did for the people that were already in it, so let's see.
I'm an 8. I'm with Lisa.
Right.
Yeah, we got kicked back, I think.
All right. So it's going to be weird. I have to move you to another group and then move you back out of it. So just, you're going to go into group 9, but you don't belong there. You'll be back. Hold on.
And it looks like Kenya's still in the main room too.
Yeah, I moved her into your group and now I'm going to move her back. So join the group that I sent you to and then I'll move you back into the right one. For some reason it doesn't give me that option.
Okay.
You may also just need to go out and come back in. I apologize for that, but is it?
I can leave and come back in.
Yeah.
You want me to exit and come back? Because I've never closed from lunch.
Yeah, I'm assigning you back to your rooms, guys. So let's see what happens. I'm trying it right now.
Okay.
All right, so hopefully that's going to happen for Lisa and Kathy. You're being invited right now.
Nope.
All right, yeah, you're going to need to go out and come back in. I apologize.
Okay, see you in a second.
All right.
Thanks.
Go all the way out.
Yeah, I think you need to because it's saying you're not in there, but you are trying to get in there.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, everybody just go out and come right back in and should show up you're unassigned.
So leave the main one. The main one.
Yeah, come out of go out of Zoom, come back in.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. We're going to begin. We have a bunch of our attendees joining us. Hi, I wasn't kidding when I said we're doing a graduation. Here I am. Welcome back. We are going to have a ceremony where we go into hearing from a little bit of our graduates and celebrating them, and hearing from our dean, and then also honoring some people, some invited guests as well. So, but first, before all that, we need to have a processional. And so I'm not going to make you actually stand up. But, my wife has graciously agreed to compose or play for you. So this is my wife, Lucy Fox. She has been a trumpet student for 1.5 years, and this is her message of congratulations for you as graduates. going to celebrate you. This is the third cohort. We're going to graduate. This is one of my all-time favorite photos. This is the cohort that we are talking about today, the school mental health advanced practice program cohort. You're looking at a lot of folks that are right now on camera, and you'll be meeting them a little more in a minute, and I'm going to brag on them and share some things about what we know that they've done with our time together. We have an agenda. We're going to have a little welcome and orientation from me. I have some recognition I want to do of fellows that have joined us. I'm going to also ask our Dean, Gautam Menon, who's joined us today, to speak and offer some remarks. We have a student speaker, Jacqueline Ware, one of our graduates. She's going to speak and be able to talk a little bit about her experiences. And then I'm going to invite all of the graduates to get their official certificate. And I'm going to invite all of the people who know these graduates in the chat room, our class cohort, any of the instructors who are with us, anybody else who's crossed paths with these fine folks over the last few years, to share some things that they're grateful for, that they've learned from them. I'm going to share some of my own gratitude for them in recognition. All right. So this is a program that I think in a lot of ways, I wish more researchers got a chance to do, not because they would do the same program, but because all of this work we're about to celebrate comes out of my own experience as a school social worker, my own desire to keep pushing myself and learning, but also to find a community of people I could do that learning with. And I did a lot of research on the practice identity of school social workers and the struggles that we all have to be evidence-informed and data-driven. I learned pretty quickly that it's not just a school social work thing, it's definitely also true of school psychs, school counselors, special educators, school nurses. And so with the help of Dean Menon and a bunch of other really great people at our school, I was able to get this program started. And this is our third cohort. This is a group of people that came together and I think became a real community. They taught me a lot. I'm going to miss them terribly. At the same time, I also know that some of the resources that we've built together means that we will get together again. We will meet in person again as well. We'll get together next summer in Chicago, hopefully. But we're also going to miss them because they've made a tremendous contribution to our program, to the schools they work in, and to each other. Before we do that, though, I want to recognize that we've had people come through this Summer Institute who are also people that have informed and formed the basis of the certificate that we're looking at today. This is just a short list of some of the experts we've had over the last 15 years. I was reflecting on how this is the 15th year of doing this, 15th annual. We've had over 1,400 of you come through and get your CEUs. We will keep doing this and we will keep offering that as another way for people to stay connected. So these are all just people I love. These are good friends of mine at this point. These are people that have taught me a lot, and I'm grateful that they're here. I'm also grateful to celebrate some people. I don't know if Robin has been able to make it back yet. She is so busy right now with school reopening. She may not be with us just yet. But I want to recognize Robin Kogan, who was one of our keynote speakers this year. She is the nationally certified school nurse that is all over the news right now. She had the quote about that it's like Russian roulette to reopen schools without the knowledge and the safe measures in place and the science. And she did a great job of kicking it off for us yesterday. So she is going to be one of our first SMHAPP fellows, people who we recognize as making unique contributions to our program. And then somebody who's needs no introduction to Loyola people, but I want to just celebrate and call out, and he graciously agreed to dress up in regalia as well today. Dr. Jonathan Singer, who is the associate professor at our school and the creator of the Social Work Podcast, and has just recently, in addition to his role with the American Association of Sociology as president, really convened a very meaningful and important group that if you're a social worker and you want to learn about how elite social work leadership is or isn't dealing with the issue of policing in schools. We talked a lot this morning about an anti-racist frame as a school mental health professional. Jonathan convened a discussion with views of people wanting to reform police and others that want us to defund the police. So he's always got his finger on the pulse of what matters, and I'm so grateful to have him as one of my dear friends. All right, so Dean Menon, I wanted to go out and ask if you wanted to talk next and share a little bit about your reflections and your experience.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and thanks to all of you for your introductions. And hopefully we'll get to meet soon on campus in Chicago and get to celebrate in a more formal way. As I always tell my faculty and staff, we truly are in unusual times, but these are also times that sort of gets us to think about the basics of why we do what we do and the kids that we serve and the communities that we contribute to. So it's always wonderful for me. Graduation has always been, I would say, in my academic life, that is one day I really look forward to. Not because I want all of you out, but I want all of you out into the community. So that is always a very special day. And I've been working with Michael for some time now. I've just started my 4th year at Loyola, but I've known of his work for some time and his leadership to this program and all of our faculty and staff who sort of support Michael in getting the word across is something that is what Loyola stands for in terms of we are pretty much a justice-oriented, social justice-oriented profession, and our school within a Jesuit framework can and should and will contribute to make sure that these types of issues that all of us face in today's environment is not the new normal. It cannot be the new normal. We cannot sort of accept it to be the new normal. But at the same time, it is a time where we can reinvent ourselves and be creative and look at things in different ways. And that's the beauty of the profession, because as social workers, we are more than any content that you will learn. I think we are all prepared to be nimble and be comfortable in ambiguity, to be able to come up with solutions. All of you work with kids, and I can be pretty sure that every day you create something for something to work for that individual child, which the textbook would say, hey, do this, but you tried, it's not working. So you experiment, you pivot, you do something for that child. And that is what social work is about. It is that caring for that one person in ways that only I think our profession caters to. We do not like to or want to pathologize everything and put a label and put them on medication or whatever it is, but our role is to ensure that kids need to be kids during the time they should be kids without any other stressors that go along with it in their lives. So for me, that's a very special role that we play in terms of how school social workers, and especially with mental health training in a much more advanced level, that all of you are able to discern right from wrong on. And it's not just the practice side of things, because I'm pretty sure that if you see something wrong systematically, which hurts the kids or hurts the parents, our role is to step in and say, the things have to change. It cannot be done the same way. So pushing that envelope is what we do in terms of making sure that we learn from our experiences. We always talk about practice wisdom, sort of equating that. For me, that is more or less on par with the empirical evidences that we have, because it's a cyclic process. I mean, you learn empirical stuff, you try to put it into practice, things don't work, you experiment with something, then you test that thing, and it's a sort of a continuous lifelong learning loop that we all go through. So today is your day. I mean, you all are done with the program and you are the experts. And you have a role to play within your schools to educate others, in terms of this is how these things need to be done. So with that, congratulations. And I really look forward to hearing from all of your projects. And I'm sure Michael will update me with all the wonderful things that you all do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, Nimanan. We're going to hear now from our student. We can have a round of applause. Do a round of applause. We can hear from our student speaker today, Jacqueline Williams. Jacqueline, are you ready?
I am. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Kelly and Dean Manon. So hi, everyone. There's a lot of you on here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Jacqueline Williams. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I'm a school social worker for a special education cooperative, and I work specifically in their autism program. I'm really honored to be here today, albeit virtually, with my colleagues as we graduate from the SMHAPP program. I'd like to recap our time together as a SMHAPP cohort and talk about some of the things that I've learned through my experience over the past 2 years with you all. So when I first embarked on this journey, I honestly wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I knew it was 99% online and thought it might just be like this independent course of study with a few face-to-face meetings peppered in here and there. But I was wrong, and I'm really glad I was wrong. In actuality, the SMHAPP program ended up being an opportunity to make lifelong professional connections and friendships. So what we've been able to develop over the past 2 years is a true friendship and learning community, which I think is kind of rare and special. We've gotten to know each other's strengths, each other's challenges, hopes, fears, families. We've gotten to meet people's pets on Zoom. We've gotten to hear each other's life stories, as well as learn new methods of practice and interventions to use with our students. I think I can say collectively that we've all learned a lot of vital things throughout our time in the program. We've learned about so many social work interventions and how to apply them in our school settings. We've learned about data-driven practices, how to interpret that data and use that data to affect change, how to use strengths-based interventions with our students and our colleagues, as well as how to be really critical in selecting the interventions that we use with our students. In addition to that actual school social work practice content, I've learned so many things that I did not necessarily expect to during the course of this program. And that learning came not from research articles and book chapters, but honestly from my colleagues and their experiences. Specifically, I've learned how to act as a leader in my work setting. I think this, for me, is the biggest takeaway from the SMHAPP program. Anyone who knows me knows that I get extremely anxious when I have to speak in front of crowds. My cohort will remember last year at the Loyola Summer Institute, me having full-on panic about the panel presentations. However, through this program, we've all been afforded opportunities to practice being speakers and leaders in our profession. Whether that's at the Loyola Summer Institute, on Facebook Live sessions, the School Social Work Network, publishing our work online, or even just facilitating those classes during the SMHAPP course program. All of those opportunities really help push ourselves to be more comfortable with our voices and assume leadership roles. And the best part was knowing that even if I screwed up, even if I stumbled over my words or embarrassed myself, my cohort colleagues truly did not have a judgment, and they were honestly there to support me and see me thrive. I've also learned how to operate in a professional learning community, specifically how to make lasting friendships with fellow school social workers and learn with them as well. I've learned how to power through a Tuesday workday and come home really tired and exhausted, but excited because I knew we were going to meet virtually with my classmates to talk critically about articles that we've read, to talk about, interventions that we tried, what worked, what didn't work, to vent about problems that we had during that workday and kind of use each other as a soundboard, and just to share laughs with one another. So all in all, it has been truly an honor to learn and work alongside every single one of you guys from our cohort. I could go on and on about each and every one of you and what I've learned specifically from you, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to say thank you. Thank you for being such a supportive group of people. Thank you for sharing your personalities and lives with the group, and thank you for helping me become a better social worker. This has been such a great experience, and I know we'll all remain connected in our learning and our friendships, and I'm really just so proud of us that we made it to this day. To our SMHAPP professors, I think I can say this on behalf of everybody. We really, truly appreciate all the time, work, and effort that you put in to help us strengthen our school social work practice. And Dr. Kelly, thank you for trailblazing this program and giving us all the opportunity to connect with one another and become leaders in our profession. This has been a fantastic opportunity with so many benefits. I'm so glad that we all decided to do this 2 years ago, and congratulations, everybody.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you. Round of applause for Jacqueline, for sure. So in the spirit of honoring and recognizing these fine people and sharing a bit about what their work is, I wanted to take a minute to just to graduate them and to recognize them and to invite them to recognize each other. So those of you who have access to the chat, also people who are not directly part of the program, but if you have contacts with the folks that you've just are about to meet, you feel free to chime in as well. I just want to introduce you to them briefly and say what I'm grateful for among many things. I'll pick one thing that they've taught me and that I'm taking with me because I got to work with them. Sean Delaney. Sean Delaney is a school social worker and SEL leader in Ohio at a girls' school. One thing I am very grateful for Sean is her diligence at helping and designing and creating an editorial voice for our schoolsocialwork.net site. She took that on before we made it an independent study for her, and she's kept doing it. She's taught me a lot about how to coach and support other school social workers as they become writers. And I know that's something I'm going to invite all the other attendees to think about. So that's a person you want to know. Dori Delikowski. Dori Delikowski is a school psychologist in central Wisconsin. And what Dori has taught me is how vital it is to have a way to organize an implementation plan that makes sense for the people that you do it with. Dori was instrumental and has continued to be instrumental in bringing a zones of regulation and a self-regulation curriculum to her elementary context. And she has really been, I think, very intentional and thoughtful about it in a way that's helped me think about what are the levers that make people want to actually do things that sometimes they don't think they can do or want to do, or that think it's the school psych or the school social worker's job. And her manner of doing that was just lovely. Carlos Evans. Carlos Evans is a school social worker in Peoria. He is past president of the Illinois Association of School Social Work. Carlos, I am grateful for many things about my time with Carlos, because what he's done is, I think, really modeled a attitude towards the work that is just always conscious and fired up, but also really reflective. And that's a really unique combination in people that I've worked with professionally over the years. There's people that are fired up, there's people that like to analyze everything, and those people don't always work well together internally. And Carlos really does it. And he's also just a blast to be with. Nadia Gomez Moran. The first thing about Nadia that I'm grateful for is that I get to have this vicarious thrill of having somebody graduate from our program who is a school social worker at the high school that I interned at back in 1992. And to hear and see all the amazing work she's done to be helping her school become trauma informed, particularly for some of the more vulnerable populations within her school, her high school. I also agree, we did some webinars where we asked each other to talk about our strengths. And one of the strengths that Lisa Johnson-Hare noted about Nadia was her just kind of quiet determination. And I think that's a real strength of Nadia's that she gave me a lot of examples of, and I'm very grateful I got to know that about her. Angie Halstead. Angie Halstead is a school social worker in Nebraska, Fremont, Nebraska. Angie's probably one of the more modest, soft-spoken people I've ever met as a school social worker, at the same time that she is the school social worker of the year in prior years in Nebraska. And she only reason I knew that is I looked it up. She never told me, I had to look it up. She is also determined to make her work fit at a macro level, a community level. So she's been very instrumental, even though she's one social worker amongst many, many kids in a school, and that's just recently changed. She has been instrumental in making her school community and the community at large more responsive. And I'm very grateful that I got to see her writing about that from a context very different than what I live at in Chicago and in suburban Chicago. Tanya Hernandez. Tanya Hernandez is a school social work liaison in Clark County, Nevada, in Las Vegas. Tanya has taught me many things that I'm grateful for. One of the things she taught me is just how much moxie she has to do things that I think are desperately needed in school social work and school mental health more broadly. She took on a Herculean task at the height of the shutdown to think about how do we do a remote learning plan that is school social work and school mental health specific and also is effective. And she took that on and she basically had to do it in 3 days and she did it. And then she did a webinar about it and then 7,000 people have watched that on our YouTube channel. So I'm very grateful for all the things that she's done for the kids in Nevada and what she's taught me. Lisa Johnson-Hare, she's a school social worker outside of St. Louis, Missouri. She has an amazing gift for getting down to brass tacks, so to speak. She's very clear about things. She asks really pointed and effective questions. She's also done this for a long time, so she has a lot of experience, and I was very grateful for all of those things. She's also just very fun to kind of talk to about this work because she's been through a lot with her own kind of high school context, and I had many times that I felt very connected to how she was viewing the kids she served because they reminded me of the kids I used to serve. Laura Montiel. Laura Montiel is currently, she got a different job during our time together. She's currently largely working around tier 1 work, I believe, right, Laura? And what I love about Laura's work and what I'm grateful for is the way she brought a sense of humor to it at the same time that she was determined to power through and to challenge herself to say, what more than the caseload that I have, what more can I do to extend and deepen the work? And being persistent about that. She was also someone like Jacqueline shared a minute ago that had a lot of anxiety about presenting. And of course, as soon as she talked last year, she was hilarious and funny and completely on point. So I'm very grateful I got to know you, Laura. Gabriella, Gabby, we call her, Gabby Ramirez, is a school social worker in a specialized school in Chicago Public Schools. Kind of like Nadia, Gabby has an amazingly calm manner that underneath it is a very determined, thoughtful, and creative soul. She's done amazing work in her projects, and you can read all about it on our site, to really build the capacity for Spanish-speaking and English-speaking parents who have kids with really pretty profound special needs, because that's who's at her school, to really find community themselves. So one of my main areas that I'm very interested in is how our schools can be more welcoming to families, and all that Gabby does is about that. So I'm very grateful I got to learn how you do it. Krista Sote. Krista Sote is a school social worker in a small town on an island outside of Seattle. What I loved about Krista, and I'm grateful that she gave us, was this amazing persistence. She wins the prize, not that we all don't have schools that go up for grabs. She wins the prize for a school that was in complete transition. Literally, they tore down the building and rebuilt it. And she kept going, and she made a priority of doing something at a tier 1 level. She used humor. She made it fun. I learned a lot from you, Krista. Thank you. And finally, Jacqueline Williams. So she just gave a great speech about what it meant to her, so I don't want to repeat any of that. But I do want to say that what Jacqueline does, and you need to know Jacqueline for, is I'm so grateful for how creative and inspiring she is in working with kids with autism. She loves those kids. She loves knowing that she can make a difference with them, and she does. So thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, everybody. And I'd like to give a round of applause to all of our graduates. All right. So we've had a lot of experiences, and we're not done. All of those fine folks you've just met are people who you're going to hopefully see again at some point. We're going to have lots of times that people can come together via schoolsocialwork.net, School Social Work Network, and schoolsocialwork.net. And I welcome all of you being in that space. So I want to just play us out. All of you graduates are welcome to stay. We're going to have a debrief and talk about what this 2 days has meant for the larger community. But I'm going to play you all out with my wife's Facebook again. So here we are. And by the way, I know that my 4th cohort is on today. You're going to get to see that wacky dog Dior, who really likes pretty much anything my wife does, but particularly when she plays her music.
Congratulations, graduates.
All right. So thank you everybody. You're welcome to stay. As I said, we're going to move on to talking as a Summer Institute about what we've done. And thank you again, Dean Manon, for being with us today. And we will see you all down the road. All right. So let's come back together. This has been a really interesting 2 days for me as well. It's been a little different for me than it has been for you, because you've been, when you're in your breakouts, I'm sitting here and I'm waiting for you to call me in, and you're asking me questions and I'm telling you things. But a lot of what we've done together has been centered around, I think, the very vital set of issues about what it means to reopen schools, what it means to do it through the 3 lenses we looked at today and yesterday. So I'm just curious, as we wind up, to hear from, and I'll unmute any and everybody who wants to be, to hear from people about kind of what they're taking away. Like, what are some takeaways? These could be things that you have decided as a group that you're going to do, your small group. They could be something individually that you're taking away. There is going to be time, and I've asked each group leader to write up kind of that paragraph as well as what didn't work, and so we'll have time to look at that. There'll also be, when you get your CUs and all that, there'll be a kind of feedback form and all that. So we're not going to do that today. But I am kind of curious as we do this. This has been a new experience to do a 2-day version of something I've done usually only in a couple hours. What are you taking away from this? And really, I would say, given the size of the group, I'll probably need people to raise their hands so I can call on them. But I would love to hear from people before we sign off.
I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
To break the silence. One of the things that my big takeaway is, I definitely need to figure out how to plan for more grief groups with students and staff and maybe families, whether it's virtual, hybrid, whatever. Try to figure that out. How would I do that? As well as if there were to be lots of cases of evictions, like, what can I do? What resources can I get together to help support families? And if there's any way possible to work with childcare programs to support families if we were to go back hybrid, but their numbers are limited too. So like, how would we figure that out to support families? So those are some of the big takeaways that I'm leaving with. Like, I need to start to wrap my brain around that kind of stuff.
Great, and I appreciate, Penny, the work that you did for Justice Elementary as the principal, and the way you brought us through a lot of complicated things that you had to contend with. Thank you. I've asked also Dr. Singer to stick around. I'm going to ask him for any kind of closing thoughts he has, and based on things he hears and stuff like that. Other folks, you can also write in the chat too. You don't have to talk by voice. Yeah, Susan.
I love the combination of hearing from keynote speakers and you this morning, Dr. Kelly, and then being able to break up into a smaller group. I thought the balance was perfect. It really gave us a chance to think from all different perspectives based on what we had just heard from you and then what we were able to hear from each other as a smaller group. And I think mostly because of the great way that you trained me when I was in school, Dr. Kelly, I really enjoyed the challenge of thinking about the 3 tiers and approaching the problems within our school along those lines. It made me think that it's not as hard to come up with practical strategies that I could bring back to my own school. For example, there's really no wrong answer. I was telling my group I felt like it got my creative juices flowing and helped to reduce some of the fear, maybe sense of, I don't know, intimidation that comes with having to think outside the box.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thanks for the kind words for it was always great to have you be part of Loyola's programs and all the things you've done. I would say to one of the things that Susan said that I do as a takeaway for me, having studied this issue all summer and talking to people like Robin and Jonathan and other people that are talking nationally, is there really, you know, to some extent, there really isn't a wrong answer right now because no one's ever had to do this before. No one's ever reopened during a pandemic. I mean, there are things that we need to be careful about doing harm, but other than that, I think we just need to really talk about what does it mean to be responsive in this moment. And, you know, and I think that what I saw in the plans you all put together was a lot of dynamism and creativity where you were trying to do that. And I really appreciate that. People can put things and shout outs to their groups as well. I see group 7's loving on each other a lot. So feel free to do that as well while we're talking. Other people, yeah, Jenny.
A lot of us discussed in our group just how it was nice to, you know, play the other roles, to be able to look at it from their standpoint, but also to be able to kind of, we had a little bit of time. We wish we'd had more to play in our real roles, you know, and bring that to the table. And just the openness and the support that we had, you know, and everybody valued everybody's opinions, you know, and so, yeah, I can't remember what else we were trying to say. And even like talking about, you know, like the racial equality and things, we all felt very open that we could share, even though we had just met the day before, you know, and be able to share with that with an open space and non-judgmental. So that was nice as well. Whereas, you know, maybe even if we'd have been in person, we wouldn't have felt as comfortable doing that. I don't know, you know, but, and I'm glad that Michelle and I put us together because we actually complemented each other very well. So that worked. So it kind of took away, you know, some of my fears with that. But yeah, I don't know if our team wants to add anything else because I probably missed something, I'm sure.
I love it. And I did really think of you two as a good combo. So I'm glad that worked out. Other folks? There's lots of good stuff coming in the chat box too. So yeah, Alyssa, yeah.
So I thought Penny did a great job facilitating our group. Thanks, Penny. And I wanted to say, you know, I don't always feel like I can be such a great leader because I don't know all the facts and I don't, you know, there's so much coming in right now. I'm actually trying to tune some things out, but I felt like these last 2 days helped me be more confident in having discussions about some of these hard topics. And, you know, we acknowledge and then work through that some of this was going to be uncomfortable, especially some of the material we talked about today. So I just feel like more confident being able to go back and work with my teams and speak openly and with some more knowledge. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for how you put that too. That's lovely. Other folks, anybody else? So I do want to tap a few people that I would love to speak. I would love, is Michelle Capio still here? I don't know, are you still?
I'm here.
Okay, that's all good. I'm just kind of curious, as somebody who is an instructor in the SMHAPP program, I want to ask Erin this too. You know, what you heard and saw and how you even see it fitting into what we just did with the ceremony, if you want to offer any reflections.
Sure, I was eating chips if anybody didn't catch that when I turned my video back on. I'm like, it's definitely snack time. Well, first of all, the ceremony with the graduates, like tears in my eyes. I think there's just one of my biggest takeaways, maybe because we just did that ceremony, is how impactful it is to come together collectively and problem solve, and to be able to have the space in which you can hear from different perspective. And one of the reflections I gave that cohort at the end of my time with them this year was, we're better together, you know, and it's sometimes we forget that. And it's really easy to feel like an island onto your own because we don't get to team together the way that we did the last 2 days. So even reflecting on this, you know, last 2 days with my group number 1, there's so much we can learn from each other if we just take the time to pause long enough to listen. It's hard because there's so much going on. And I totally get that too. I resist getting on a Zoom call. I resist, you know, another Castle workshop that I have to sit and listen to. I have a real resistance to it right now because it's a lot, but then you do it and you recognize the benefit of, wow, I've learned so much. I learned from Dr. Kelly this morning, like the learning never stops. And it's good to have space where we're primarily clinicians coming together around a topic because it's rare. So I hope I didn't go on too much, but cohort number 3, my love for you is real, and it's so good to see your faces. And I think that that cohort model of coming together with a group of folks and staying together for a couple of years, it just manifests in such a positive way of connection, but also resources. And like Jacqueline said, that professional relationship that you're gonna have those phone a friends for years now, that when you get in a bind, you know, Sean's problem solving, she's calling Carlos, and then Carlos can call Lisa. And I think that's just the beauty of connection. So that's my takeaway.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And I would just amplify one thing you said there, Michelle, about the connection. I mean, what I would love everybody listening today to think about is how to use the School of Social Work Network as one of the places you all can come together. It's free. It's like, if a lot of us seem to use Facebook, it has the ability to be relatively secure too. I mean, we could create private groups or things where you could really drill down on something and it's just yours. But I want us this year to really make use of that in some more dynamic ways. I mean, certainly people are using it, and certainly when I put something up there or other people pay attention to it and talk about it. But I really hope that this year you all use that space in addition to maybe something like this or the certificate to come together. Erin, can I ask you any kind of reflections being part of these 2 days and anything you want to share?
Sure. Well, one thing, just to be funny, the picture that everybody likes of cohort 3, I would like photo cred for that, because I believe I took that at the Institute. That was the best picture. I love taking it. You guys all looked awesome. Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Michelle said, and I was sitting here looking at the list of everybody that's here, and I did the program before it was, before Dr. Kelly, I think, fleshed it out and made it what it is now. But I did the program 14 years ago, and 3 of my 6 consultation group members are still involved, and I see them at these institutes every summer. So that just speaks to kind of, you know, the personal relationships and like learning from each other and just keeping in touch and, you know, using each other for consultation. 14 years later, we still kind of, you know, talk to each other and keep in touch. And yeah, what I really appreciated about the work, and I think it's echoed in the cohort 3, is that there was a lot that was really overwhelming about the task at first, as far as schools reopening, like, okay, come up with the plan. And there are so many ethical issues that are just heart-wrenching and trying to figure things out. And administrators have been trying to figure it out for 3 months. So feeling very overwhelmed. And then all the information, but then when the breakout sessions, and like we feel powerless, I think in those times, or can feel powerless. And then, but kind of like once you put your foot in and once you start to like really break down, and our group really took solace in the triangles. It was like, all of this is going on and we've created this program, but the triangles are ours. Like what are we gonna do at the 3 tiers? And so learning a little bit, you know, from the lecture, either with Dr. Singer or Dr. Kelly, and then, okay, how does that apply with the triangles? We're all feeling like we go back and maybe our principals aren't asking for our input right now, maybe our school boards and our superintendents, but it's quite possible that the week before school starts, they're gonna go, oh, by the way, mental health team, yeah, what should we do? And I envision myself handing them my triangle, like, here, this is what you do. But at least we have something, and not everything in those triangles is gonna work for every school. Our school, the school that we're looking at is different than our other, the school we actually work in, but at least we have something to go on. We're ready. You know, it would be nice to be consulted with the entire time, but that's not always the reality, and it's just chaos right now. So, so it's nice to have those big issues, whether you're in your cohort, and then to break them down into usable things, or like the last 2 days have been kind of the same thing. So yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you, Erin. And I want to amplify something you said, and then invite Jonathan and Robin, Robin's joined us. Welcome, Robin. I don't know if you were here to hear that you were a fellow as part of this, and we're glad to have you with us. You are now a fellow for the SMHAPP program. But one of the things that Jonathan said yesterday, and Robin is just embodying it and living it right now with all the things she's doing, is this idea that democracy isn't a spectator sport. And I think that extends to our own school districts. And, you know, a lot of what we're going to see and hear and should see and hear is teachers unions and organized labor pushing back at some of these school reopening plans and some of the other things going on in the country right now. But I think it's also a space for us to think about how do we either, you know, invite ourselves to those tables, push into those tables, create our own table, invite people to, whatever the image you want to use. So I would be curious to hear from you, Robin and Jonathan, about some of that, like what you're thinking about as we move into this fall, as we take the next 6 weeks to try to, apply pressure in a way that's effective and evidence-based. Hear from you all before we head out. Hey, Robin, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Robin.
Yeah, so, I have been thinking about this nonstop. Keeps me up at night. It wakes me up real early in the morning. And what I want to say is that what I've learned through COVID as a school nurse, and you might relate to this in school social work, you know what, when we don't have the ability to have structure for upward mobility in our roles, and we have no place to grow vertically, right? We have to grow horizontally in some ways. And what I have found through my just most recent experience is that I am tired of having nowhere to grow vertically. I think it's a real disservice to the passion and the work that school social workers do and school nurses do when we are really kept in this box and we have something like COVID and we're looking at reentry, and people who have great skill set and experience and are clearly experts have to beg to contribute to reopening plans to people who are the decision makers and have no background in these things like social and emotional learning, the mental health piece, the public health piece. I mean, do you hear my anger? Yeah. So I guess what I want to say is get vocal. Put your voice out there. We have to stand up and say, wait a minute. Call it out what it is. I mean, I got my little slap on the wrist for speaking out to the New York Times and saying that we're playing Russian roulette with our kids and our staff. You know what? I don't feel badly that I said that. I got in a little bit of trouble, but it opened up some interesting conversations that have to be had. So I guess what I want to say is wherever you are in your career, look for ways to grow horizontally if you can't grow vertically. And that's being a lifelong learner. Clearly you're involved in this event because you're a lifelong learner. Writing articles, writing letters to the editor, be present on social media. It's a very powerful place when you use it in a positive way. And keep going. Find your tribe, because there are people, like-minded people, I'm sure most people in this group are that person, that you can feel supported by, because there's a lot of people working in education who are so afraid. They're so afraid to make any ripples. They're so afraid to get called out on anything. And I guess maybe I've lived a few more decades than some other people in this group, and maybe I've earned my right to say, I'm too old to ask for permission, so I'll ask for forgiveness. But I guess that's my message. You have a powerful voice. You do an incredible service to our young people. But you also have to fill that part of you that has your own sense of, not just motivation, but what you want to do beyond maybe what's happening directly at school. What do you want to do as your legacy? That's what I've been thinking about lately. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, Michael, but.
I did. I do. I think you're getting lots of love from me and others in the chat as well. That really resonates. And I think I look forward to you and I and the work we're going to do together on this and continuing to build connections with our various disciplines. Dr. Singer's tough act to follow, man, but anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
I mean, what can you say after that, right? I think I'll expand on a couple of points. One, there are some very legitimate boundaries that employees have to acknowledge. And, asking permission and not for, asking forgiveness and not permission is certainly one way that we can think about doing things. And I think if you have the opportunity to talk with a reporter, you never know what the reporter is going to use out of your conversation. So literally everything you say can't be the perfect soundbite. So I think absolutely say what's on your mind. I also think that people will be making decisions in school districts, and social workers will intentionally not be invited to those conversations. And it's absolutely reasonable for social workers to invite themselves to those conversations. And if for whatever reason, because of your role, it really wouldn't make sense or it would be a conflict, reach out to some of the parents who are in your district and have them attend those meetings and have them be the voice, because somebody's got to be the voice. And you all have this amazing perspective, and I wasn't involved in the hard work that you did over the last 2 days, but it sounds incredible. It sounds like you all could just write a roadmap for the country with all these different scenarios.
Yeah.
And I would really, and people don't know that, right? Your school districts don't know that. The parents in your community don't know this, and they should, and they deserve to, and the students deserve to know all of the work that you've been doing. So if you don't go to the table, because there are good reasons why you shouldn't, make sure somebody else is at the table, and take this stance of either leading in front or leading from behind, either manage down or manage up, and use your power, and make sure that this fall is as healthy and as learning and as emotionally safe and as amazing as any other fall that you've ever worked. So congratulations, you all.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Robin, and thank you everyone else for being here. I want to say one last thing, and we will end on time. What Jonathan just said and Robin just said in their own ways about ways to make noise, ways to be at tables, ways to make your points known. With the things that Scott Carcetti and a lot of you and Sean Delaney, who's with us today, have helped do, we now have 2 platforms that we can leverage. Right now, this report we just did with our national survey is getting out to some people that we wanted to get out to, and we're going to hopefully push that further in some state level and congressional work. I would love nothing more than all of you and these 9 plans that you've created and the feedback you've given me about this process. I would love nothing more, like I said to you earlier this afternoon, to find ways to translate that material and share it widely. And again, it won't be done without your permission. I'm not just going to go off and share it, and certainly not going to claim credit for it because it's your work. But I want you to know that the fact that you spent 2 days thinking about these issues, and like Robin and Jonathan both said, are not always invited to even have those conversations. I would love to spend the next month getting that out there to the world and making it really clear that if you don't invite school mental health and school nursing to the table, you're going to be in big trouble as a school. And I think that parents, I shared this yesterday before we go, parents are already getting this. I mean, that the polls are showing clearly that this rush to reopen is not working. It's not going over. Parents want to know, how can we do this well? How can we do this reasonably well? And we have something to offer that. And you just showed it for 2 days. So I invite you to think about that more. I mostly invite you to just go and do whatever you do, sit on your deck, have a margarita, take the dog for a walk. Don't think about this for a while. But mostly what I want to do very much is just thank you for making this such a special 2 days. Thank you to all the SMHAPP leaders and certificate people who were the leaders. I want to give a big round of applause to all of them. The fantastic work they did. And stay tuned. I mean, certainly if you want to be part of this in bigger ways, you can reach out to me. We will be doing Facebook Live events next week, next Wednesday, the Wednesday after. But mostly I want you to just kind of to sit with this a bit and be ready to move forward, because that's what we're going to do. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Your CEUs and all that, we'll be following up with you next week. And take care. All right? Bye, everybody.
Bye. Congratulations. Double
Bye. Thank you. Dr. Kelly, you don't need anything else from us, do you?
No, you're done. You're done. Off you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kelly. Bye. Have a good weekend.